think we are here mainly ladies or young women, is that right? I cannot see it, but I guess so. Now, when I was invited to come to the award ceremony here, I must say I was very honored, first of all, and thank you very, very much, but I was also stumbling about the term career. And I thought to myself, how does the term career relate to me and my life? And to be frank, if somebody asked me about my career, I didn't know what to answer. I have never had a job in my life. I never had a boss. I never was offered a career ladder to climb up. Somehow this never really, linked to me, my life, and whatever I'm doing. Actually, I also, because we're here amongst so many that are striving for degrees or maybe have degrees, I want to admit here in this round, I am a proud university dropout, or maybe actively spoken, jump out. Yeah, because, and I tell you why. I have studied Tibetology, Central Asian science, philosophy and sociology, and right before my examination, I went to Tibet and I found out that this is the start of my life. And I said, why sitting in university, translating all these old prayer flags, but if I could have a much more interesting life. So now, career is a term that is a little bit difficult for me to understand. The other term, empowerment, I can much, much more live with. Because empowerment means help for self-help. It means assisting others to find their energy, to get out of their comfort zone. And empowerment means catalyzing people to turn the impossible into possible, or maybe saying to turn limitations and disability into possibility. And this is basically what we are doing in Kantari. Kantari is a leadership training center for social change makers from all around the world. And these are people who have overcome adversity in their lives. Some of them were child soldiers, some of them women that faced violence. Some of them are people with albinism who have to face, to be killed, to be in danger to be killed by witch doctors or by politicians and business people, because they think in East Africa having a finger of an albino in your pocket means becoming rich and academically advanced or politically successful. Now, these people, they all come from many, many different countries. They come to Kerala here to understand what it means to be a social change maker, to understand how it feels to voice your opinion, how it feels to challenge the status quo, to say why or why not, to understand that their adversity is not or is not making them weak, but to understand that their adversity is actually making them a force for good. Now, therefore, all of them are Kantaris. And you know what a Kantari is, right? Kantari Molaka? Kantari chili. It's a small chili that grows wild in the backyards of Kerala. It's very small, but very spicy. And for us, it's the perfect symbol for somebody who has fire in the belly, who has the guts and the spice to challenge the status quo, and who has the power not just to talk, but to actually do something good, to be healthy. And yet, not everyone likes Kantaris. Not everybody likes the spice, and still it is good for human beings to have a little bit of spice in this society. Now, how did I become how did I get into this how to say, into this field of social change. Or maybe I could say, how did I become a Kantari? Actually, I was born into a family of Kantaris. My parents, both of them, were Kantaris, or are still. They are heavily challenging the status quo wherever they can. My brother is doing the same with art. He's an artist. Actually, my mother was my role model for a long, long time. When I was a little child, when I was a girl, and when I was still sighted. She told me these stories from her youth. When she was just becoming a woman, with 21 years old, she left Germany and ventured out to Turkey. And in Turkey, she studied Islamic art, and then she had to, of course, measure mosques. And in order to be able to measure mosques, she had to dress as a man. And then she went all the way through East Anatolia, dressed as a man, and measured her mosques for her studies. So I grew up with these stories, and I thought having an adventurous life as a woman is a just normal thing. And of course I wanted to have an adventurous life. And then later, when I became blind, with the age of 9, it started, I understood that I didn't have a role model anymore. Because normally people would not say that blind people could have an adventurous life. People would say, stay in a secure ground. There are lots of possible jobs for blind people in Germany. For example, if you are well educated, you can become a lawyer, or you can become a psychologist, or you can become a mathematician, or whatnot. But please, stay on paths that have been trod before. And that was the thing that I heard constantly during my time when I became blind. Not from my parents necessarily, but from teachers, from the society. Now, I was full of fear, I must say. When I turned blind, I had the feeling that I would be discriminated for the rest of my life. I would be isolated for the rest of my life. I would not have friends, and I would be totally, completely sidelined. And one more thing that made me really fearful was that sighted people told me, once you're totally blind, your life is in darkness. I hated darkness. I didn't want to be in the dark, and I tried it out myself. I went to our basement. We have basements in Germany. I switched off the lights, and I tried out to walk in the dark, and it was horrible. I couldn't. Well, I faced isolation. I faced discrimination. I went totally introvert, from an extrovert to an introvert. I didn't even talk to my parents anymore. I thought to myself, what is life worth? Life is worth a damn when you're blind, when you're becoming blind. Especially because the society knows too much what you can do and what you cannot do. Now, my parents were very, very, they were very intelligently handling this situation. They were not panicking. They would give me the feeling that one day I would take myself out of the mess, and they would talk to me about historical events that had something to do with my life. For example, the civil rights movement, the Afro-American movement, black people in America in the 50s and 60s, they didn't want to be black. They didn't want to be seen black because they felt excluded and discriminated. But then, hello? Yes? Okay. Is there something going on which I need to know? No? Okay. Good. So I said, they told me about the civil rights movement, a movement of people who were outside, sidelined from society. And I actually could very much identify with black people, with the Afro-Americans who tried to avoid to appear black because they felt black is ugly, black is inferior, and they put some cream, some whitening cream. I think you have something similar here, Fair and Lovely, right? Yeah, they put this bleaching cream on their skin and they try to straighten their hair just not to appear black. And I knew I didn't want to appear blind. I could totally identify. And then my parents told me about this turning point. The turning point in the 60s, where the Afro-American movement turned the term black from being seen as ugly and inferior into black is beautiful. Have you heard about it? Yes. And this gave me almost, 10 years later, maybe, I was about 11 years old. This gave me almost like an electrical shock when I heard this. And I still remember lying in my bed and trying to play around with the little English words that I knew. Black is blind. Black is beautiful. So, blind must be beautiful. Now, I asked myself, what is so beautiful about blindness? I couldn't speed on my bicycle anymore. I couldn't recognize faces anymore. But then I thought, hey, I'm not distracted. I'm not distracted by Hollywood and Bollywood anymore. I can focus. I can concentrate on what really matters. Also, I figured out that my communication skills became much, much better. Since I was blind, I couldn't use my hands anymore. I couldn't gesture. I couldn't show. I had to verbalize everything. And that made me very, very clear and very, very strong in describing things. And because I was blind, I was forced to become a problem solver. And since I was pushed like I was a kid in a sighted society, in a society that was made for visual input, and I was pushed in this society, and of course I had to find my own way, and I had to find my own way of dealing with things. So I had to become a problem solver. And one more thing, when I became blind, I figured out that I could actually imagine things much, much better than before. And when I knew all about this, I had the feeling, hey, now all of this, my imagination grew stronger, my communication skills, my focus, my problem solving skills, hey, blindness can come. I can handle it. And now I can also handle darkness. So what? And then I became fully blind. Well, the eye doctors, the ophthalmologists told me that I'm actually fully blind, that I was not even able to see light and dark anymore. And I was wondering, where was darkness? In fact, the life, the world surrounding me became much, much more colorful and much more beautiful because I could imagine it. Now, you might wonder how it works. Actually, it's a little bit like reading a book. When you are reading a book, you are not actually reading the letters in the book, but you are seeing the images right away. And then I want to tell you one thing that might frustrate you. You might read your favorite book, and later you hear that your favorite book is made into a film. And you go into this film, and what happens normally? You are disappointed. Exactly. I'm never disappointed, right? So now, when I knew all about this, I remembered back my mother, who claimed the right to take a risk in the early 60s. And I wanted to claim my right to take a risk, despite the fact that a lot of people said, please, stay on the ground. Yeah, don't grab for the stars. Now, I had a few more rights to claim, and one of these rights were definitely the right to be blind without being disabled. And another right the right to take over responsibility. And these wishes or these claims for rights brought me to Tibet, where I met my dream man. I'm not married, by the way, but I have a boyfriend. I think it sounds much nicer, right? And I have him for 20 years already. So Paul was there, and actually one more interesting thing, because I made photos of him. So we met there. He was a lonely traveler. I was a lonely traveler. So now, of course, lonely travelers meet. So I can always encourage you to travel. You will meet the most interesting people. Now, I made photos of him, and I showed these photos to my friends and to my family, and they asked me, who's the blonde guy in your picture? And you know what? I pictured him with black hair. And I couldn't imagine who was the blonde guy. I said, well, the blonde guy must have run into my camera. I didn't know. And I must say, I liked black hair. And I liked his voice, and I thought he must have black hair. So I showed him the pictures later. He was in Holland, I was in Germany. I traveled to Holland. I showed him the pictures, and I said, well, you were there. Who's the blonde guy? And he said, well, that's me. I was a little disappointed at that point, but I took him anyway. And 1 year later, we went together to Tibet to start the first school for the blind in the Tibetan Autonomous Region. Now, in Tibet, and I want to make it short because I think I don't have so much time. In Tibet, we are working with a lot of children who are afraid of their future. And I realized that in Tibet, it's mainly the blind children who are afraid of their future, because blindness is seen as a punishment for something you have done in your past life. Here in Kerala, it's actually almost everyone who's afraid of their future, right? So in Tibet, and we did something in Tibet which you can try out for yourself. We started a dream factory for these blind kids. And we told these blind kids, think about what you really want to do in your life. Don't think about what others expect from you, or better, don't expect from you. Think about the most beautiful, beautiful picture that you can see in 5 years from now. And paint it with the most beautiful colors in your head. And they did. At first a bit hesitantly, but later with much more courage. And then this little blind boy, Norbu, 8 years old, totally blind, he came to us and he said, you know what? I want to become a taxi driver. And Paul said, well, that actually sounds good, because you just have to look at the taxi drivers in Lhasa and you can see there's a great possibility for blind people to become taxi drivers, right? So now this little kid, he got thinking, and after 2 years he came back and he said, you know what, I understand now, I cannot become a taxi driver because I'm blind, and it would maybe not be so safe for me or for others, but I can start and run a taxi company. And what is better? Now, later, this boy, he was the first blind person ever traveling to Holland, going in a plane, and he became a cheese maker, and he later ran our cheese factory, which had a lot of delicacies. Now he has his own little restaurant, he has a massage clinic, he's a very, very successful man. A lot of these kids who we trained back then in Tibet, they are now in their 30s, and they are very, very successful. A lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of social entrepreneurs, people who are running massage clinics or restaurants, or even little stores. One has a whole orchestra, and we thought to ourselves, how is that possible? How is it possible in a so blind, unfriendly society surrounding like Tibet, and these kids are so successful? And we discovered 5 mutual things. 1, these kids had nothing to lose. They were already at the margins of society. Nobody would expect anything from them. They just could take a risk. Whatever they did was a plus. Second, these children didn't have to be everybody's darling. They didn't have to be the good boy or the good girl. They could stand up and could challenge the status quo. They could say something that might not be liked by everyone. They were truthful to themselves. Third, these children were ethical, or are ethical. They learned from us not to make excuses to themselves, and also to be on time. And since Tibetans are never on time, they had a great advantage there, you know. So the fourth thing was these children learned to dream, embrace their dream, believe in their own dreams, embrace them, and go step for step forward to achieve these dreams. And fifth, these kids learned to embrace their limitations, to understand that, for example, blindness is actually or could become an advantage, to understand that disability is the mother of invention. And understanding this, I must say, we started to think about the center here in Kerala, in the south of India. We came to Kerala in 2005, and we started this center for people in the margins of society, for people who have overcome adversity, but who are not victim of circumstance, but who are forces of strength, and who come with ideas how to make the world a better place. So 183 people have been trained already from 41 different countries. This year, by the way, we have our 10th generation, and there are still applications open. So if you know any Kantaris, if you know anyone who wants to be a Kantari, wants to be a social change maker, we have still some spaces, especially for Keralites, because most of our people are so far from other parts of India, not from Kerala, unfortunately, and many, of course, from Africa, from America, from South America, from all around the world. Now, why are these people so successful? 70% are really going out there and making a huge difference in the world. Why are they successful? Because they can dream, they follow their dream, and whenever somebody tells them, stop dreaming, don't grab for the stars, you are too small for such a big, big purpose, they just say, just bite into a Kantari, and you will see that a small chili can make a huge difference. Thank you very much.